Welcome to Rick on Life, brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Media Project. I'm your host, Rick Amitin, and this is where we like to talk about things that are affecting our daily lives. Today, I have a wonderful guest, Jill Corley, with us, and we're going to be talking about the world of editing. When Jill retired, she retired from medical billing practice and became a caregiver to her sister-in-law. Jill knew that she was going to need something to keep her brain stimulated. So in May in 2015, she signed on to Goodreads and offered her services as a beta reader. After some friends encouraged her and some careful research, Jill added professional editing to her portfolio. Since that time, she has been involved in developing over 150 novels with a significant number of writers. Jill, welcome to Rick on Life.
Thanks, Rick. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you. When I see people who exist in the world to just do good and help others, I get really excited about that. It makes me want to hug them and tell them how much I appreciate their positive contributions in the world. And, you know, this is how things kind of started for us, Jill, when I first became acquainted with you. And I can't thank you enough just to see you day in and day out on our social media outlets and the positive contribution that you're always making. And you're so supportive and even inspiring, I think, to a lot of people. So let me just say, first off, how much I appreciate who you are as a person and your presence and your being out there in the world and doing what you do the way you do it.
Well, thank you very much. And I do feel the same about you.
Well, thanks.
I'm glad that we connected.
Yeah. Well, you know, it helps to connect with people that don't drag you down. You know, you
Right.
with people who can help keep you up. And, you know, we're all facing challenges and these are difficult times that we're living in. But there's no excuses to be made. You know, we can still make progress and do good things and help other people. And so thank you for being who you are first and foremost.
Well, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Now, we touched briefly on how you began your business, Jill Corley, LLC.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something here that's obviously more than just work for you. So would you say that this is your dream job?
Absolutely. It totally is. It is the most fulfilling job that I've ever had. And I've had some really good jobs, really good employers, totally enjoyed them. But this is my baby. This is all me. Everything that I succeed or fail with is mine. And I am totally enjoying it. And it's also something that I can help others by doing. So, yeah.
Have you always been an avid reader?
Yes. And oddly enough, I started out in fourth grade. I was having a lot of difficulty reading. And I have an uncle who was a teacher. And he tutored me. And it was like all of a sudden the light bulb went off and I just loved it. And by the time I was in sixth grade, I was reading so well that I was on a college level, and I didn't have to take reading in seventh grade except for that little short, half a year or one semester. And then I got to take a language, so I chose French. So yeah, reading at first was horrendous difficulty, and I despised it. But the right teacher and the right, circumstances, and now I'm like always looking for a book. You never see me without, I've got something in my hand to read somewhere.
Well, we have a little bit of a parallel then in our experiences. I was not a reader as a kid. I didn't really start reading until I was probably in my 20s, married with at least one child at that point. But I'm deep inside me. I've always been kind of a cowboy. If I could have picked my time period to live in, I would have been the first one that came over the mountains here in California and settled the valley somewhere along the line. But I discovered Louis L'Amour, and I started reading Louis L'Amour, and he wrote a lot of books. And once I got started doing it, I didn't stop, literally, until I read every book that he had written. And it's interesting, just a few months back, I became friends on social media with his daughter.
Oh, nice.
And he has passed on, and so she and I had quite a conversation because I had read so much of her father's work. So yeah, once I got into it, now I don't read a lot of books like that anymore. I do read often, but it's a total different genre most of the time, and I'm looking for self-help and empowerment and things like that. But so what then would you say that you specialize in as a genre, or do you specialize in a particular genre?
I do specialize only because it seems to be the most contact that I have, and that is I stay with fiction, and it's usually fantasy, science fiction, metaphysical things, paranormal. I've branched out into horror, not occult, because I would like to sleep at night.
Yeah.
So, if I read one of those, like on the idea of, Damien or The Omen or whatever that is, I forget it. I'm going to be awake for a month.
Right.
But the horror that I'm reading is interesting. I'm able to help the writer. So it's really kind of branched out a little bit more. I've worked on some magazine articles, which is nonfiction. So I'm kind of like a little bit all over the place,
So if nonfiction came to you, I mean, you would work with that.
Yes, I would. Yeah. I mean, I have a nonfiction background just from being in the medical profession. I had written my own policies and procedures, things like that. And I held two jobs at the same time. And the second job that I held was as an administrative assistant for a sawmill. So I was responsible for everything from, the daily correspondence to working up, handbooks and policies and procedures and things like that. So I am kind of used to technical writing. I've been away from it for a while, but I'm sure I could get right back into the swing of things.
Sure. Well, I'm sure you could. Proofreading and editing are two, from my perspective, very critical aspects to publishing, not only books, articles, whatever. I still think it's important, that those two things happen, but they are different. And so if you're just doing proofreading, explain to us how you approach that. And then if you're editing as well, there's differences there. So help us understand the difference between the two and how you approach both.
Well, to me, proofreading is the last step. It's when all of the other issues have been resolved, the book is ready to go, and all you're doing is going through and cleaning it up, making sure that the punctuation is good and that there's no typos, there's no, there's just, it's like it's not rough, it's nice and smooth to read. If you're editing, and I do what I call an everything edit, which is I address every single thing from the beginning to the end that I see will take the reader out of the story. And that is my favorite way to edit. And that can entail large things like plot holes, character development, things like that. And that is where I think I excel, because I can kind of spot those things right along with all the little proofreading stuff that I do at the same time. Because my objective with that type of an edit is to be, I hear a lot of writers say, oh, I set it aside for a month and then I go back and I edit, or I set it aside for several months and then I go back to edit because I can't see my own mistakes. That's my job. After you've done your edit as a writer, and you send it to me, and I can do the everything edit, which is your second set of eyes, so that I can look for the plot holes, you know, check character development. I have had issues where, you know, as a beta reader, I had said to them, this isn't making sense. This happened in the beginning, then this happened, and this happened, and it's not following the right timeline. So I've saved the writers, you know, a lot of hassle, you know, before doing that. And that was just as a beta reader. So like I said, that seems to be my forte and what I like to do best. And I love to just dive into the book. And I don't just edit, I get involved. And if I can't get involved, then there's an issue with the book. Like there's something preventing me from forgetting that I'm reading and not actually there. So that's kind of how I look at it. You know, the editing is the big meat of it, and then the proofread is the cleanup.
When I started to write, the first thing I chose to write was a memoir. And I learned that many people think that a memoir is maybe the hardest thing to write. I didn't know that at the time, but I certainly did realize once I got into it what I was trying to do. And, you know, not all memoirs are the same. Some of them just are a happy memoir. You know, mine was, I was dealing with some family stuff and some pain involved in it. And so I was not trained as a writer, and I was probably very ill-equipped to take on the task. But I had a story that I wanted to tell, and so I outlined it and I started writing. And I thought I was going to have maybe 11 or 12 chapters, and I had about 8 chapters written when I had an invitation to go to a writer's retreat. And when I did that, what came out of that was an outline, what we called a matrix, which completely changed the whole dynamic of the book. And then I realized they were being very nice to me, but over time, as the editors worked with me, they let me know I had a lot of excess weight in there. That was what you said, taking people out of the story. I had some story killers in there. I had some examples that didn't really fit where I had them and all of that sort of thing. And so the book that I ended up writing was not the book that I first envisioned and what I set out to write. The story is, and I think it got done very well, but it wasn't by me. It was because I went to someone like yourself who knew this, who had experience in this, who had worked with authors, and who knew how to look at what I was doing. So I think the work that you guys do is incredible, and you know, very helpful. And so not only did they do beta reading for me, but they did the editing, and they helped me with the, you know, the overall way of putting it all together, as well as all the other things, the punctuation and things like that. But there were deficits, and if they hadn't have pointed those things out, I wouldn't have known it, because I was just so thrilled that I was actually doing this. You know, you fall in love with you're like, oh, this is powerful. I'm telling this. I mean, you know, it's people are going to be affected. They're going to be touched by this, and then you realize, like you say, if you're reading it and it takes you somewhere else and you're not really in the story, there's a problem. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that you guys do, I think, is you know, is very helpful. So when you find those kinds of things, we're all different and we all have our personalities. I try to be easily corrected. Not everybody is, you know, they fall in love with their story, and if you start, you know, telling them anything's wrong with it, they can get, you know, pretty wonky on you. So how do you address the issues when you actually find them?
Usually I start by questioning the writer of their intent. Like, why is this in here? Is this what you intend? What are you trying to convey? Here's what I'm getting out of it. Maybe it needs to be reworked a little bit. There's not enough information here, but there's way too much over here, and we go from there. And I truly believe with every cell in my heart that you need to tell people when they do things right. Not everything that they do wrong, and never stuff that they do wrong first. You know, say, hey, you did a really good job here. However, I'm having a little bit of a problem a couple pages back. Can we, you know, talk about this? You know, why did you put this in here? Is it, what are you trying to convey? And then they're very receptive to, oh, I didn't realize it was confusing. And it's because they're in the story. It's their story. Right. So they're not realizing that there's either so much information that you got lost somewhere, or that there's not enough and you're kind of like trying to connect dots that are too spaced far away. So I think that it's always a positive thing. Like, give them positivity, and then not negativity, just explain to them where you're coming from. Don't trash them. I mean, this is their baby. You know, this is something that they could have been working on for 15 minutes or 15 years.
Right.
And, you know, I don't care who the person is. It's their story, regardless of whether it's, you know, an autobiography, a memoir, or, you know, something about an alien. It's theirs. And I really firmly believe that at the end of the day, the author has total control. I can make suggestions. I can, you know, clean it up. But at the end of the day, it's what they're comfortable with. I never argue with an author, ever. I give them what I feel and why I feel it, the reasons behind it, and, you know, research if I've done it, if it required it. And then I let them make the decision. So I don't really have problems.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, there's so many personalities, and, you know, people can be very open to suggestion, and other people are like, no, and they may not see it, you know, the way that you're seeing it. But it all depends on what you want to do with this book. You know, if you want other people to read it and you want a broad audience, then it really helps to pay attention to the feedback that you're getting. I got some excellent feedback from beta readers. Mm-hmm. Things that I didn't see. Even the editor didn't see it until it was pointed out, and it's like, oh, yeah, I kind of felt something there, but I didn't really, you know, capture that, what was going on there. And then somebody else sees it. And then I did have some people who saw it completely different than it was written. And so I chose not to make a change there. But mm-hmm. I would say 90% of the feedback that I got back was valuable, you know, and very helpful. And so what's the sense in going through this process if you're not going to be open to, you know, the information that you're getting back? So when you're doing this kind of work, do you see this as kind of a solitary pursuit, or would you say you put yourself in the team setting and work together?
I think primarily it's team. Your job as an editor, proofreader, beta reader is to assist the writer in understanding whether they've conveyed what they intended to convey. If you're not going to work with the writer and you're just going to be autocratic and go through the book and say, here's what needs to be changed, okay, I'm done, that's when you're solitary. And I don't really see it as that. I see it as a give and take, a discussion sometimes. I mean, I've talked to writers, you know, at length about certain parts of their books. Like, okay, you do need that in there, but the way you're writing it, it comes this way, and maybe if we change it, it'll straighten out. And we go back and forth like that sometimes, you know, indefinitely, until they're satisfied with what I've, you know, brought to their attention. Whether they change it or not, like you said, is your your choice, you know, based on what you know the story to be. But if you get so many people, including your beta readers, besides your editor, who's saying to you, that's just not washing, something's not right there, then, you know, it does, as you say, as the author, it behooves you to kind of think, oh, you know what, maybe I should rewrite that, or maybe I should add that or subtract this. So yeah, I'd say team. Solitary in that I get to sit in my office and I get to just read and do my job. But, you know, basically it is a team effort.
Yeah, I got into that as the writer. I got into that as a mentality, you know, that I have a team now. I don't have to do this by myself. That's the way that I felt about it as a writer. And so when we sent the book out for beta readers, my editor talked to me a little bit about that process, and so I came up with kind of a formula of the way that I was going to receive feedback. And for me as a writer there, I said, okay, if I hear it once, I'm gonna consider it. If I hear it twice, I'm gonna really look at it. If I hear the same thing 3 times, I'm probably gonna rewrite. And that's kind of the way that I approached it. And there was one area that I didn't get the same negative feedback, but I got negative feedback on the same portion. Mm-hmm. Even though they saw it differently, everybody had a negative reaction to it. And so I thought, oh, we need to rewrite that part right there. And so we did. That's sort of how I proceeded with that. I can be very critical of my own writing at times, but that in itself doesn't always make me objective.
Right.
And so as an editor, you're going to be aware of your strengths and weaknesses as an editor, but how do you keep yourself objective when you're working with various authors and storylines and plots? And
I think the trick for me to stay objective is just to remember that it is not my work of art. I'm not the artist. I am somebody to help get the artist out there, to get them visible, to make it a success. Not that I can't debate the issue. Like if I feel very strongly about something that I'm telling the writer, I give them more to go on than just, this is my opinion. This is why I have the opinion. Here's what I'm seeing. You know, I give them a little bit more information than just saying, well, this is what I think you should do. Do it. Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't get a lot of horror stories. I work a lot with newer writers, first-time writers, indie writers. But a lot of the first comments are, you know, it's like, well, are you going to make me do that? It's like, no, that's not my job. Yeah. My job is to point out what I think is going to take the reader out of the story, whether it's too much negativity, you know, too much flowery speech, whatever the case may be. It's my job to point it out. It's my job to kind of reinforce my opinion. Like, here's why I say this. You know, here's my research. Here's the reason. But at the end of the day, it's the author who has to decide, okay, did she make her point? Kind of like a debate. It's like, okay, did I win that debate or not? You know, but it's like, it's not a lose-lose type of thing. It's to get the writer comfortable with their piece of work. You know, a lot of the things that I see with new writers is that they don't have the confidence. They have the story, but then if you tell them like certain things, it's like, oh, you know, I was really worried about that. I kind of thought I didn't do it right. It's like, there is no right and wrong. It's your story. The issue is making your story, you know, what's the word I want? Like, that the masses are going to want to read it.
Readable, you know.
Right.
Right. Yeah. You want it to be readable, that people will enjoy. You know, I've had books in my hand that, after a chapter or two, sometimes not even a chapter, I'm ready to throw the book against the wall. It's like, this is so frustrating. What's the guy talking about? And here, that like the title might have caught me, and maybe even the blurb might have caught me. And so I grabbed the book. I think there we go. And so, and then you get into it, and it's like, oh, this is so disappointing. It's just not there. And so why would you want your readers to have that kind of an experience? So you really want to pay attention to the process. And that's the reason I think that, that when people are looking for editors and they're looking for beta readers, that you know who you're working with. I mean, my book went out to people that I didn't know. They were strangers, but they were not strangers to my editor. So it's like my editor had this group of people, and she knew which ones that that would be good to read my book. And so, and then you're asking an awful lot of people when you're asking them to read an entire manuscript. And so if people take the time to do that, by all means, I would think that you would just, in common sense, would be to pay attention to whatever the input is. Which brings us to kind of the next point. When people are looking for an editor, what would you say? How would you advise them? Of course, you're an editor, and so it may sound self-serving here a little bit, but I know your heart, that's not you. But when people are looking for an editor, what kind of qualities do you think they should be looking for?
I think the biggest quality, beyond obvious skill, is whether or not you're going to match personalities.
Yeah.
If you can't work with the editor that you've chosen, that's going to be a problem, both for you and for the editor. Fortunately, if I've ever offended anyone, they've never said anything to me, and I've got a lot of repeat, clients. But that said, I'm not really a pushy person. So if you need to have a pushy editor, that's what you should look for. Somebody who's going to really make you think and sit and do it. I'm one of those suggesting editors. It's like, here's really why I think, but it's your art, so I'm not going to tell you must. Some writers need that. I would not be good with a writer who needs to be pushed, kind of like exercise, I'm one of those. If you want me to exercise, you're going to have to stand there and cattle prod me to do it. So
yeah, I had a couple of places with my editor. Of course, I met you, well after my book was published, but the editor that I was working with is somebody who's become a very good friend with me. But we had some moments when she was trying to convey something to me that I didn't get. I mean, I knew it was important, or she wouldn't be taking the time to want to talk to me about it. And I also became further convinced how important it was because she wouldn't let it go.
Right.
And she kept talking to me about it. So it was but I wasn't seeing it, and I really was not trying to be resistant because it was all new to me. I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, I was that guy that you just described. I was a new author. I'm an indie author, and I did not know what the process was going to be and what it was going to entail. I felt very fortunate to land with the people that ended up helping me with the project. But I still didn't always understand what they knew. They knew things I didn't know. But I knew that from an experiential point of view, but I didn't really understand it necessarily contextually. It's like, okay, in this context, you're trying to convey this to me, and I'm not getting it. And I was somebody who put the project on hold for a little bit and just let it sit, because I felt it was important for me to get it before I moved on.
Yeah.
And I did. Eventually, it cleared up, for me. But if I would have had an editor who was willing to let that go, to just make a suggestion and then leave it, and not really try to convey to me the importance of what she was trying to tell me, I in the end, I would have been sad about that. I'm glad that she was the type of book coach and editor that she was and is, because eventually I got to, I got where I needed to be with the book. So,
well, I'm not saying that I don't push the point. I do push the point. But there comes a time where if you're going to get in an argument over it, or you're going to offend them, to me, the juice is not worth the squeeze in that case.
Yeah.
I've made my point. I've told you why. We've discussed it multiple times. I've bugged you about it. But there comes a time when I stop bugging, because I really do believe that you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. And nothing more that I say is going to convince you one way or another. And as you said, if you put it aside and you think about it a little bit, they'll come back to me, I'd say at least a good, 3/4 of the time, and say, I agree with most of it. I agree with some of it. The other point, like, nope, forget it. We're done talking.
Yeah, there were points, for me in the process when, and I think she is very much like you. I think if I was adamant, no, I'm not going to do it, I think she would have moved on. In the back of her mind, I think she would have known I was making a mistake. But there were some things that we discussed that she nudged me on that I ended up keeping the way that I was comfortable doing it. But there were lots of changes, that I responded to from her, because ultimately, it's like you say, it is my story. It was my story to tell. And, her job was to help me tell that story the best way that I could, not to change the story in any way. And I never felt violated by her. That she was trying to control any aspect or change the story. I always felt like she was trying to help me tell it the best way that I could. And even though there were points there that were difficult. A memoir is so much different than the rest, because in a memoir, you have other people in the story who may not want to have that part of the story told.
Right.
And you have to figure out how you're going to address that. And it may be putting some people in a bad light, and they may be really upset with you about that. So all of, those kinds of things had to be factored in. And to be honest with you, I needed help. I needed help with it, because there were some things that ultimately didn't get into the book. And I think it was fine that it didn't. And there were other things that got into the book, but maybe the person was nameless. Some people might figure it out, but everybody won't. But it's not like staring them in the face, hey, I told this about you. And it's, it's once you hit publish, it's out there forever. And so it does take some time to contemplate and consider, the long-term effects of like what I was doing. If you're just creating a fictional novel and you got your story, it's made up, and you don't have those particular, arteries running through your, your project, then to me, it would be a lot different. I don't have a clue how to write fiction. I wouldn't even know how to get started. I took a little stab at it, and I tried to bring some fiction into my writing world. And I think I'm horrible at it. You know, if you want me to tell a story, a true story, I can do that fairly well. But I'm not as good with the made up stuff. Even though I have tried to do it. But when I see like I have friends, you know, this is what they write. And when I read their stories, I mean, it's like magic.
Yes.
But I can't do it. You know, it's just not who I am. And I don't, you know, I don't have this big drive to become that either. I do have a drive to do what I'm doing. And so I, you know, at my age, I kind of know my lane and I stay in that, but I need people, always need people to help me. So it's never a solo project for me. It's like, I want a team for everything that I do. So it's like, I'm just better with people, you know, than I am. I'm very creative. That's never my problem. And I don't struggle for ideas too much. And that kind of thing is always sort of there. But it's, you know, it's the craft of writing. It's the art of writing. And I'm much better at it now than I was before I started. But I was a speaker for 30 years. And, you know, I wrote an article for one of the literary sites, and I entitled it From the Stage to the Page. And it was that experience of realizing when you're communicating verbally, it's an entirely different thing than when you're trying to put it on paper.
Right.
And that was that was sort of a big thing for me. And see, I think an editor who understands that kind of, you know, dynamic that's in play is invaluable. Fortunately for me, I had somebody that understood it. And she knew kind of what I was doing. And if I was on a stage telling this, it would flow without, you know, effortlessly.
Yeah.
But trying to write this now was not the same. It was not the same. And, you know, I'm a nerd guy too. And so I like words, and I'm forever, I don't think there's a day goes by I don't look a word up. I want to know the meaning, but so many times, even the words that you have, if you used them, nobody would know what you're talking about because they're just not, you know, used all the time.
Right.
But I like them, and I would learn a new word every day if I could. But I've used a lot of words like that in my writing, and they were forever telling me when I said, you know, you hear it once, look at it twice, really look at it 3 times, you might want to change it. But there were beta readers who come back on the same thing. Why is he saying this like that? Why is he using that word? You know, I had to look that word up, you know, and I'm like, okay, we got something wrong here. We better. And what was so funny is the editor told me ahead of time about that. I think you might want to use a different word there, but I love that word. And so I let it go out to the beta readers, and then when it come back, I said, you know, about that word, you know, we'll change that. You know, I think you're right there. So, you know, it's a fun process, I think, if you approach it that way. And for me, I needed help, and I wanted the help. I was very open to the help. I was the guy that was like, please help me. You know, help me get this right. Help me. This is an important story, important piece of my life here. And I want to do a good job. And so I don't know how to do it. And I'm not going to act like I do. I'm telling the story. Here it is. Help me shape it. And, you know, I had tons of stuff in there that had to come out. Not that they weren't good stories. They just didn't belong there.
Yeah.
Maybe in the second book or, you know, or somewhere else. But without someone like you, you know, that I had as an editor, I would have been in real trouble. So, you know, I would encourage everybody when they're writing to understand that, you know, make it a collaboration and not, I mean, if you're that good, then, you know, great. I can celebrate that too, but most of us aren't, especially when we're writing a book for the first time.
Well, and you're too close as the author. You're too close to the story. I mean, I've done that already. When I worked and I had to write anything, I wrote it, And then I had somebody else look at it because I knew darn well that I was going to miss a mistake.
Yeah.
And I would gloss right over it because I was so focused on what I was trying to say that as I'm writing it, I'm not seeing that I made a mistake. As an editor, people look at me and say, "You make mistakes? Oh yeah, every day. You should see some of my writing."
Everybody does.
But it's my writing, so I'm going to gloss over the fact that I misspelled here. I meant H-E-R-E and I put H-E-A-R. You know, I know better, but I'm in a hurry. I wrote it down and I just didn't see it. So I think your point is well taken, that everybody needs somebody else to look at their manuscript and say, okay, yeah, this is working, this isn't working. I got lost here. I totally followed that. That was excellent. You know, so yeah, I mean, but like I said earlier, I think that there is a way to deliver news. You know, like I said, not that I don't, you know, fight. I mean, really, my husband will tell you flat out that I am like probably the world's best nag, because when I get something stuck in my craw, I don't let it go until.
Well, husbands and wives, that's different.
Well, yeah, but I think I'm like that too. I mean, the doctor I worked for most recently said to me, you know, sometimes I just want to give up. He said, you just nag to the point where it's like, okay, whatever. You know, and I don't really, he's teasing me, but he also knows that I wouldn't nag, as he calls it, if I really didn't believe that whatever I'm saying is important. And not that I'm telling him what to do, or not that I'm telling the writer what to do, that you must do this, or you know, the book police are going to come after you. It's my considered opinion. And what I do preface telling people, like when they say, oh, you're an editor, I follow the rules, but I also know when they need to be broken. And in addition, you know, when you look at anything in the artistic vein, it's subjective. It is always opinion.
Right.
I mean, you know, they can look at a Picasso and completely can't stand it, and yet look at Monet and absolutely love it, because it's their personal taste. Sure. So I always kind of tell my writers, it's subjective, it's opinion, but it's, as an editor, it's our job to be broad-based, you know, and not tunnel vision. You know, you're the one that's tunnel visioned because you're the one that wrote it. It's our job to point out what the masses will or will not accept, you know. So that's kind of what I do.
Yes, absolutely. Jill, let's move on here and change our train of thought here a little bit. Outside of work, outside of the editing and the proofreading, beta reading, and the stuff that you do for your actual work, what do you consider your greatest achievement?
That is difficult. I'm kind of not a great achiever. I'm more of a like an everyday get it done kind of girl. You know, it's I think a lot of what I've achieved over my life is not like milestone worthy. It's just plugging away every day, kind of just doing the best you can with what you got. And I'm kind of one of those that I'm a problem solver. So if I get a problem solved and it worked out really well, then I'm a happy camper.
Celebrate it.
But as far as ginormous achievements, I think I would actually have to say either my marriage on one hand. I mean, it's 37 years. And in today's throwaway society, I feel that's an achievement. You know, I believe that my husband and I think that a relationship should both be easy, but also be worked at. And, you know, we've known each other for 39.
Yeah, not taken for granted.
Right, exactly. You know, and I think that's an achievement.
I'm with you there, because we're celebrating 36 years this year. And
oh, congratulations.
We've known each other, add 3 years to that, at least 3 years, maybe 4. So yeah, we're pretty parallel there. And I agree with you. I think that is something That to me is it's a huge accomplishment because it's not easy. You know,
Oh.
you go through all these years and all these ups and downs, and you know, we change. We both of us change, you know, over time,
Mm-hmm.
and learning that new person, you know, that person that's changed in and evolved into whatever. But you know, there are some things that have been very constant too. So I'm thankful for that. So to me, I celebrate that with you. That's a great achievement. What would you say brings you the greatest joy?
I would say just everyday appreciation of whatever you had happen that went right. You know, we took my sister-in-law in after the death of her mother and her sister within a 2-month period of time. And my sister-in-law has special needs, and she was very used to just sitting and not being paid attention to. And my husband and I worked with her, and we got her to understand she was her own person and that she could do what she wanted and she could talk when she wanted. So that is one of the things that brings joy to me, to see her go from a person who wouldn't speak, even if she was spoken to somebody who starts a conversation and can talk about what's on the news. You know, I mean, that is awesome. I kind of take joy in other people's successes too. You know, my grandniece is getting, you know, an award in school, that kind of thing. It's
Sure.
just those little things. It doesn't have to be a big thing. And it's not like I'm a Pollyanna. You know, I have my moments, as we all do. And I have had, you know, like everybody does, extreme negative impact on my life, and sometimes for long periods of time. But my personal belief is if you sink to that level, if you let the negativity get to you, you're never going to dig yourself out of the hole that life threw you into. So if you don't stay positive, at least don't get negative. You know, figure out, okay, I can't go that way. Let's try this way. And I think that's really how I live my life and what makes me happy. It's just I don't let it beat me down.
Yeah, I would say that I had that figured out, you know, that you get joy out of helping other people. I mean, that's not a surprise to me. That's
I really do. And it kind of, you know,
way
people look at me and say, really? It's like, yeah. When I know an author's gonna release their book, I get as excited as they do, you know. It's just, it's really cool.
Yeah, sure. Well, Jill, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on the show today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And for those of you that are interested in connecting with Jill, you can connect with her at jillccorleyeditor.com. jillccorleyeditor.com. Every week we strive to bring something useful to our program. I'd love to hear from you, comments, things that we've talked about, things maybe you would like to see us talk about. I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at rickonlife@gmail.com. And remember, whatever's going on in your world, just sprinkle a little love on it. I'm Rick Amitin, and I'll see you next time.